Imagine a world just overflowing with information, right? Every article, every research paper, maybe even every note you've ever taken holds some kind of golden nugget of knowledge.
It's absolutely everywhere.
But the question is, how do you actually get to those nuggets without, drowning in this massive sea of data? How do you cut through all that noise?
Well, that's pretty much why we're here. Welcome to the deep dive. We see ourselves as your, let's say, personal shortcut to being truly well-informed.
Yeah, we take your sources, peel back the layers.
And pull out those surprising facts, those essential insights. We try to do it with, just enough humor to keep you hooked and hopefully make things a bit clearer.
We want to simplify those complex topics, give you those aha
Yeah.
moments that actually make the knowledge stick.
Exactly. And today, we're embarking on a really foundational journey, a deep dive into HTML. It's basically the very skeleton of the internet.
Our source for this adventure is this incredibly comprehensive guide, HTML from Beginner to Expert. It really promises to lay the groundwork for understanding how web pages are actually put together.
So we'll be pulling out the absolute must-knows, those details people often overlook, and crucially, the best practices that lift you from just knowing what HTML is to really understanding how to use it effectively.
Right. Our mission for you today is pretty simple, but powerful, to equip you with the absolute core foundational knowledge of HTML.
Yeah, understanding not just what it is,
Yeah.
but why each piece matters in the grand scheme of the web, and importantly, how you can immediately start building with it.
Think of this as getting your essential toolkit ready, your starting point for creating content for the web, focusing on those basic principles that underpin literally every single page you visit online. All right, let's dive straight in then. When you visit any website, you see the design, the text, the images. It's the result of many layers working together.
For sure. It looks seamless, usually.
But right at the very core, holding everything up, giving it that fundamental organization, is HTML. It's like the invisible skeleton of every web page.
That's a perfect analogy. It's always there, structuring everything, even if you don't explicitly see the tags themselves.
So what exactly is HTML, like, at its heart? And why is it so incredibly fundamental to, well, everything we do online?
Okay, good question. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. And the first key thing is, it isn't a programming language in the same way JavaScript or Python are. You're not writing complex logic or algorithms.
Right. It's not about making decisions or calculations.
Exactly. Instead, it's a markup language. Its main job, its primary role, is simply to define the structure and the content of a web page.
Structure and content.
Yeah. Go back to that house analogy. HTML is like the wooden frame, the load-bearing walls, the foundation. It provides the raw semantic structure.
Semantic meaning, meaning it describes what things are.
Precisely. It dictates what is on the page. This bit of text is a main heading. This block is a paragraph. Here's an image. This is a place for users to type something in.
Okay, so it labels everything.
It does. But crucially, what it doesn't dictate is how any of that stuff looks. And that distinction, that's absolutely key to understanding modern web development.
So it's all about giving meaning and order to the content, not about like the visual design, the prettiness.
You got it. And this idea, this separation of concerns HTML for structure and meaning and something else for styling, sounds simple, but it's incredibly powerful, especially for larger projects.
How so? Why is that separation so beneficial?
Well, it makes everything much more flexible and maintainable. Think about responsive design making a site look good on phones, tablets, desktops. With structure separate, you can use one HTML document and just apply different style rules using CSS for different screen sizes.
Ah, so the core content stays the same, just the presentation changes?
Exactly. Or think about website themes. You can completely change the look and feel of a site just by swapping out the style rules without touching the underlying HTML structure.
That must make collaboration easier too, right? Like writers focus on the HTML content, designers on the CSS styling.
Absolutely. Content creators focus on writing clear, semantically correct HTML. Designers focus purely on the visual layer with CSS. This modularity makes websites far more maintainable, scalable, and easier to update over time.
Okay, but I can already hear some people thinking, if HTML is just the structure, the skeleton, how do things actually end up looking good? Where do the colors, the fonts, the layouts come from?
That's the natural next question, yeah. And it leads us directly to CSS cascading style sheets. CSS is the paint and furniture layer for a house analogy.
Ah, so CSS handles all the visual stuff.
Everything aesthetic. Colors, fonts, spacing, positioning, animations, the overall visual design. We'll definitely do a deep dive into CSS later, but for now it's just vital to grasp HTML's foundational role.
Because without that solid structure,
There's nothing for the styling to grab onto, nothing for it to modify effectively. HTML provides the essential canvas, the meaningful structure upon which CSS then paints the final picture.
got it. Structure first with HTML, style second with CSS. That division makes perfect sense. Now, moving to the very, very top of any typical HTML file, you always see this specific, almost ceremonial first line, die2 type E HTML.
Uh-huh. It stands out.
Yeah, it looks quite different from a normal HTML tag like P or H1. What's the deal with this declaration? Why is it always there?
You're right, it does stand out. And technically, it's not actually an HTML tag itself, but it's arguably one of the most important lines in your entire document.
Really? Why so important?
This declaration, it's basically an instruction directly to the web browser, a directive, you could say. It tells the browser what version of HTML the page is written in.
So it sets the rules for how the browser should read the rest of the file.
Exactly. And for pretty much all modern web development, for nearly every page you encounter today, it specifically tells the browser, hey, this document follows the HTML5 standard.
HTML5. So it's like a version marker.
Precisely. Think about it like this. Way back in the early web days, HTML versions were defined by these really complex things called document type definitions, or DTDs. They were often external files, and browsers had to figure them out, which led to a lot of inconsistencies.
Sounds complicated.
It was. HTML5 simplified this massively down to just dotty typey HTML. Super easy for developers.
Yeah.
Now, the crucial part is what happens if you don't include it, or if you use an old weird doc type.
What happens then?
Well, the browser might fall back into what's called Quarks mode.
Quarks mode. That doesn't sound good. What does that mean in practice?
It usually means trouble.
Yeah.
Quarks mode is basically a legacy rendering mode. The browser tries to imitate the behavior of much older, often buggy browsers, think Internet Explorer 5.
Oh, wow. So it tries to render things like an ancient browser would.
Exactly. Which can lead to highly unpredictable results. Your page might look totally broken or just significantly different across various modern browsers, even if they're usually consistent.
So it breaks that cross-browser consistency everyone wants.
Totally. It's like giving a builder a blueprint,
Yeah.
but not specifying if it uses modern measurements and standards or, medieval ones. They won't know how to interpret things properly, leading to potential structural chaos.
Yikes. Okay, so the source material really emphasizes this point then.
It does. It shows how a document without this simple declaration can look inconsistent, highlighting that potential for your page to just look wrong in different places. The takeaway is crystal clear. Always, always include don.ac type P HTML as the very first thing in your file. No exceptions.
Okay, rule number 1, start with the doc type. Got it. So right after that crucial declaration, the next essential piece we encounter is the HTML element itself. This seems like the big container, the main wrapper for everything else that makes up the web page, right?
Absolutely spot on. The HTML element is the root element of your entire web page. Everything else, original heading, paragraph, image, link, everything except that .scp declaration lives inside this HTML tag pair.
So it's the top-level container.
Exactly. It effectively tells the browser, okay, everything nestled between this opening HTML tag and its closing HTML tag is the HTML code for this document. It defines the boundary of the HTML content.
And I often see this HTML tag with an attribute, something like lang in. What's the purpose of that? Is it just like informational?
Good eye. That lang n attribute is actually more important than it might look. It specifies the human language of the document's main content. So lang n indicates the content is primarily in English.
Okay, so for English, maybe S for Spanish, for French.
Precisely. And while it seems like a small detail, it has surprisingly significant implications, especially for accessibility and for search engine optimization, or SEO.
How does it affect accessibility?
Well, it's crucial for screen readers, the software used by visually impaired users to navigate the web. Screen readers rely on this lang attribute to pronounce the text correctly.
Ah, so it knows which pronunciation rules to use?
Exactly. Imagine a screen reader trying to read a French phrase using English pronunciation rules. It would sound completely wrong, potentially incomprehensible. By setting lang far for French content, the screen reader can switch to the appropriate French pronunciation.
That makes a huge difference for usability. And what about SEO? How does it help search engines?
It helps search engines like Google understand and categorize your content more accurately. If they know your page is in English, they can better serve it to users searching in English. It can help target the right audience based on language.
So it's a small detail with big implications for how your content is understood and found.
Definitely. It improves how your content is consumed by both humans using assistive tech and by the machines indexing the web. It makes for a more inclusive and discoverable web experience.
Okay, so inside that main HTML wrapper, we find two distinct major sections, the head and the body. Let's dive into the head first. This section seems to hold a lot of behind-the-scenes information, stuff you don't typically see rendered directly on the page itself.
That's a perfect way to put it. The head element contains meta information about your HTML document. Think of it as the brain, or maybe the control center, of your web page.
Meta information data about the data.
Exactly. It holds data about the page itself, rather than the visible content of the page that a user reads or interacts with. This information isn't displayed directly in the browser window. Instead, it's primarily used by browsers, search engines, social media platforms when you share a link, and other web services.
So it provides context and instructions for how the page should be treated.
Precisely. It sets up the context for everything else that follows in the body. It tells the browser crucial things before it even starts rendering the main content.
So what kind of absolutely essential information must go inside the head for any modern web page?
Okay, there are several critical pieces. Probably top of the list is metacharset, UTF-8. This is incredibly important. It sets the character encoding for the document to UTF-8.
Character encoding, what does that actually mean?
In simple terms, it ensures that the browser can correctly display virtually all characters from all languages around the world. Standard letters, numbers, symbols, emojis, characters from different alphabets like Cyrillic or Kanji.
Ah, so it prevents that weird garbled text you sometimes see.
Exactly, those infamous emoji-bait characters like question marks or weird boxes where text should be. UTF-8 is the universal standard now, and specifying it prevents those issues. It's like the universal translator for your text content.
Got it. Essential for just basic readability. What else is critical in the head?
Another absolute must-have is meta name, viewport content with device width, initial scale 1.0. This line is fundamental for responsive design.
Responsive design, making it work on phones and tablets.
Yes, making it adapt to different screen sizes. This viewport meta tag tells the browser two key things. Set the width of the layout viewport to the actual width of the device's screen, and set the initial zoom level to 1.0, meaning no zoom.
What happens if you forget this one, especially on mobile?
Without it, mobile browsers often default to rendering the page as if it were on a wide desktop screen, then shrink it down. The result is tiny, unreadable text, forcing users to constantly pinch and zoom just to see anything. It makes for a terrible mobile experience. This tag is non-negotiable for modern sites.
Okay, crucial for mobile usability. What about the title? That little bit of text you see in the browser tab.
Right. The title element, like title my awesome web page title, sets exactly the text that appears in the browser tab or the window title bar.
Seems simple, but important for identifying tabs.
It is, but its importance goes beyond just tabs. It's heavily used by search engines. It's often the main clickable headline in search results. It's also what gets saved when someone bookmarks your page. So it's really your page's identity for both users juggling tabs and for machines trying to index and categorize your content.
Makes sense. And the source mentioned other meta tags too, like for descriptions.
Yes, briefly. You'll often see meta name description content. While the old keywords meta tag isn't really used by major search engines anymore, a well-crafted description is still super important. It's often the snippet of text shown below your title in search results. A good description can entice users to click on your link over others.
So it's like a mini advertisement for your page in the search results?
Kind of, yeah. So all these elements in the head, charset, viewport, title, description, they're all vital. They instruct browsers and search engines on how to understand, categorize, and display your page before any of the main content in the body is even loaded. They lay that crucial groundwork.
Okay, so if the head is the brain, handling all that behind-the-scenes setup and intelligence, then the body element must be, well, the body. This is where all the stuff people actually see lives, right? The text, the pictures, the interactive bits.
You've absolutely nailed the analogy. The body element is truly the heart and soul of your HTML document. It contains all the content that users actually see, read, and interact with directly on the web page.
So everything visible.
Everything visible in the main browser window. Every piece of text, every embedded image, every link they can click, every form field they fill out, videos, maps, everything.
If we stick with the house analogy.
Then the body is where you actually place the rooms, the windows, the doors, the furniture, the paintings on the wall. It's the entire living space of your website, the part the visitors actually experience.
So this is where we'd finally type something like, "Hello, world," and actually see it appear on the screen.
Exactly. The source uses that classic example right inside the body tags. H1, hello, world.h1, followed by html.p.
This is my first web page created using html.p.
And that would show up immediately.
Instantly, you'd see "Hello, world," rendered as a large heading, and then the descriptive paragraph below it. The structure and the organization of your content within the body element are absolutely paramount for creating a user-friendly, accessible, and effective website. It's where your message gets delivered, where the user's journey happens.
So even if the head sets things up perfectly, a messy body means a confusing experience. Precisely. A well-structured body, using headings, paragraphs, lists, and other elements appropriately, is crucial for guiding the user and making sure your content comes across clearly. It's where the communication really happens.
Okay, great. So we've got our basic document structure sorted, the doc type, the HTML root, the head for metadata, and the body for visible content. Now we need to start putting the actual meat on the bones, the content itself. The source talks about HTML tags and elements as the fundamental building blocks. These terms get used a lot, sometimes interchangeably. Can you quickly clarify the difference? How do they work together?
Absolutely. It's a subtle distinction, but a core concept. Basically, HTML uses tags to define elements.
Tags define elements.
Okay, think of tags as the syntactic markers, the bits in angle brackets like P or H1. These are the labels you put around content to give it meaning or structure.
So the tag is just the marker, like P.
Right. An element, on the other hand, is the complete unit. It typically consists of an opening tag, like P, the content itself, the actual text or other stuff, and a closing tag, like P.
Ah, so the whole thing, opening tag plus content plus closing tag over element.
Exactly. So P, this is a paragraph. Dot P is the entire paragraph element. The P and P are the tags that delimit it, telling the browser everything between these 2 points should be treated as a paragraph.
Okay, the tags are the bookends, and the element is the whole book-ended section. That makes sense.
That's a perfect way to think about it.
Yeah.
Now, most elements follow this pattern: opening tag, content, closing tag. But there are important exceptions, the source points out. Self-closing tags, also sometimes called void elements.
Self-closing, what are those?
These are elements that don't wrap around content, they just insert something into the document. Common examples are brief or line break, or emoji for embedding an image, or HR for a horizontal rule.
So they don't need a separate closing tag like B.
Nope. They effectively close themselves within the opening tag, like MMG, SRC, photo.jpg, a description. You can think of them like a single door that just exists versus a doorway with an opening and closing frame. They insert something, they don't contain something.
Got it. Now, text is obviously a huge, huge part of the web. How do we give it structure beyond just, dumping a massive block of text inside the body?
Right, you definitely don't want just a wall of text. HTML provides essential elements, specifically for structuring text semantically. The main ones are H1 through H6 for headings, and P for paragraphs.
Headings and paragraphs, we see those everywhere.
We do. And while these tags do have default visual appearances, like H1 is usually the biggest and boldest, and P creates space around it, their true power isn't just visual, it's about defining the structure and hierarchy of your content. The semantic meaning is critical.
So using H1 isn't just about making text big. It has a deeper purpose.
Absolutely. It's fundamentally about meaning.
Yeah.
The H1 element should represent the single most important heading on a page, the main title of the article, the primary topic. Think of it as the title of a book.
Okay, the top-level topic.
Exactly. Then H2 tags are used for major sections within that main topic, like chapters in the book. H3 would be for subsections within those chapters, and so on, down to H6 for very minor subheadings.
So it creates an outline structure for the content.
Precisely. A logical outline. And this hierarchy isn't just for looks. It's incredibly important for search engines. They use these heading levels to understand the organization and topics of your content, which helps with ranking and discoverability.
And what about accessibility? You mentioned that earlier.
Hugely important for accessibility. Screen reader users often navigate pages by jumping between headings. A clear, logical heading structure, H1, then H2, then H3, etc., allows them to quickly grasp the page's structure and find the information they need, much like a sighted user scanning visual headings.
So skipping levels, like going from an H1 straight to an H3, would be bad practice.
Definitely bad practice. It breaks that logical outline and can be really confusing for screen reader users and potentially for search engines too. Always maintain the hierarchy. The source uses a simple news article example. H1 local bakery wins national award H1, followed by P Main Street Bakery has been awarded .phar. It clearly shows how the main heading establishes the topic for the paragraph that follows. Hashtag, tag, adding emphasis and style to text.
Okay, headings and paragraphs give us the main structure. But sometimes within a paragraph, you need to emphasize certain words or phrases. HTML has tags for bold and italic text, right? But the source makes an interesting distinction. It talks about strong versus B for bold and M versus I for italic. What's the difference there, and why should we care which one we use?
Yes, this is where semantic meaning gets really nuanced, but also really important for doing things the right way. It comes down to why you want the text to look bold or italic.
Okay, the why.
Let's take bold first. Both strong and B typically make text appear bold in a browser, but strong is used to indicate that the text has strong importance, seriousness, or urgency.
Strong importance, like a warning.
Exactly. Think of warnings, crucial points, something you'd emphasize with a louder or more serious tone of voice. Warning, do not cross the line. Screen readers will often convey this strong importance, perhaps using a different tone or inflection.
Okay, so strong carries extra meaning. What about B, then?
The B tag, on the other hand, is for text that should be stylistically bold without conveying that special importance or urgency. It's more about drawing the eye visually.
Like highlighting a keyword.
Precisely. Like highlighting a product name in a review, a keyword in instructions, or maybe the first sentence of a paragraph for scannability. It's visually distinct, but doesn't imply this is critically important in the same way strong does.
And it's a similar principle for italics, comparing M and I.
Exactly the same principle.
Mhm.
Both typically display text in italics, but M, which stands for emphasis, is used to convey stress emphasis, like when you'd emphasize a word with your voice for contrast or effect. I really like that movie.
Vocal stress translated to text.
You got it. Whereas I is used for text that's set off from the normal prose for other reasons, where italics are conventionally used. Things like technical terms, foreign words, names of ships, maybe a character's thoughts in a narrative.
Like the term bona fide is Latin.
Perfect example. Or maybe a thought like, she wondered, is he telling the truth? It indicates a different kind of text, a different voice or mode, but not necessarily strong emphasis on a specific word.
So again, it boils down to the semantic reason for the styling, not just the visual outcome. Using the wrong one could actually confuse assistive technologies or search engines about your intended meaning.
Precisely. Using the semantically correct tag improves accessibility, ensuring screen readers interpret the nuance correctly, and it helps search engines understand the true structure and emphasis within your content. And crucially, if you just want something to look bold or italic for purely decorative reasons, with no specific semantic meaning attached,
Then you should use CSS.
always use CSS for purely presentational styling. It keeps your HTML focused on structure and meaning, which is its core job, and gives you much more control over the visual appearance anyway.
That makes perfect sense. Keep the meaning in HTML, the looks in CSS. Are there any other text formatting elements mentioned that serve specific niche purposes?
Yes, there are a few others worth knowing. We have bray, the line break tag. It's used sparingly, typically only where a line break is semantically part of the content itself, like in a postal address or lines of poetry. You should never use bray just to create space between paragraphs. Use separate P tags for that.
Okay, use Bray for meaningful line breaks, not layout spacing.
Correct. Then there's HR, which stands for thematic break. It represents a break between different topics or sections at the paragraph level, like a scene change in a story. Visually, it usually renders as a horizontal rule a line across the page.
Like a separator.
Exactly. The small tag is used for, well, small print things like copyright notices, legal disclaimers, side comments that are less important than the main text flow.
Okay. And I've seen things like subscripts and superscripts.
Right. Sub is for subscript text, like the tuastum in she sub tu sub. And sub is for superscript text, used for things like exponents, even sub tu sub, footnotes, or ordinal numbers like one sub.
Useful for scientific or mathematical content.
Definitely. We also have block quote for marking up longer quotations that are set off from the main text, often indented. It can have a cite attribute to link to the source of the quote. And finally, pre, which stands for pre-formatted text. This one's really important for developers.
Why is that?
The pre-tag preserves white space, spaces, tabs, line breaks, exactly as you type them in your HTML code, and usually displays the content in a fixed-width font. This makes it perfect for displaying code snippets, where indentation and spacing are crucial for readability, or maybe ASCII art.
So the browser doesn't collapse all the white space like it normally does with paragraphs.
Exactly. Each of these tags has a specific semantic job, guiding both how the browser displays the content and how assistive technologies interpret it.
Moving on, lists are absolutely everywhere on the web. You see them in recipes, step-by-step guides, navigation menus, feature lists, everywhere. HTML provides a really structured way to create these. What are the main types of lists we should know about, and when do we use each one?
Good question. HTML gives us two primary list types, and choosing the right one depends entirely on whether the order of the items matters.
Order matters, or order doesn't matter?
Exactly. First, we have ordered lists, which are defined by the old tag. You use these when the sequence of the items is important. Think step-by-step instructions, a ranked list like a top 10, or legal clauses that need to be numbered sequentially.
So 1, 2, 3.
Precisely. By default, items in an ordered list are numbered. The second type is the unordered list, using the arrow tag. You use these when the order of the items doesn't matter.
Like a shopping list.
Perfect example. A grocery list, a list of features for a product, bullet points summarizing key takeaways, navigation links in these cases. The sequence isn't inherently meaningful. Items in an unordered list typically appear with bullet points by default.
Okay, all for ordered, all for unordered. And how do you mark the individual items within either list?
Both types use the exact same tag for the individual items, the me-tell-you rule, which stands for list items. So you'll have an ol or a lol wrapping a series of light elements.
Can you give us quick code examples just to make it crystal clear?
Sure. For an unordered grocery list, .html.ul, my apple sleigh, the banana sleigh.limimilky.ul, that would typically show up with bullet points. For ordered steps, say making tea.html.ali, lie boil water.ali, lie add teabag to cup.ali, lie pour boiling water over teabag.li, lie steep for 3-5 minutes.li, and that would render as a numbered list. 1, 2, 3, 4.
That clearly shows a difference. Now, can you customize these lists? Like, can you start an ordered list from a number other than 1 or change the bullet style?
You can. For ordered lists, there's a start attribute, so ol start 5 would begin numbering the list items from 5. That's useful if you're continuing a list from earlier.
Okay, useful. And changing bullets or number types?
Historically, there was a type attribute for both ol and ella to suggest styles like Roman numerals type I, letters type A, or different bullet shapes type square. However, the modern best practice is definitely to handle all that styling the bullet type, number format, even custom images for bullets using CSS.
Back to that separation of concerns. Styling belongs in CSS.
Exactly. Use CSS's list style type property. It gives you way more flexibility and control and keeps your HTML clean as focused purely on the semantic structure.
Yeah.
Is it ordered or unordered? That's what HTML cares about.
Makes sense. And you mentioned navigation menus earlier often use lists, even if they don't look like bullet points.
That's a fantastic point and highlights how lists are used semantically. Unordered lists, ol containing lies elements, which in turn contain links, are the standard semantic way to structure almost all navigation menus on the web. Even if CSS styles them to look like horizontal bars or fancy drop-downs, the underlying structure is usually a simple greml.
So the list structure provides the logical grouping for the links.
Precisely. It tells browsers and assistive tech this is a collection of related navigation items. Lists are also fundamental for outlines, tables of contents, and you can even nest lists inside other list items to create sublists, allowing for complex hierarchical structures, like an outline with main points and subpoints. It's incredibly versatile for organizing information clearly.
Okay, text and lists are covered. But the web is visual. Images are absolutely vital for engagement, for explaining things, for just making pages look good. How do we actually embed images into our HTML, and what are the really crucial things to consider when we do?
Images are definitely key. They're embedded using the MG element. And remember, this is one of those self-closing tags we talked about earlier.
Right, no separate MG needed. So what attributes does this MG tag need to actually show an image?
There are a couple of absolutely essential attributes. First and foremost is src, which stands for source. This attribute's value is the path or URL pointing to the image file. It tells the browser where to find the image it needs to display.
So the location of the image file, what else is crucial?
The other non-negotiable attribute is alt. which stands for alternative text. This is incredibly important for accessibility and also for robustness.
Alternative text, what does that do?
Yeah. The alt attribute provides a concise textual description of the image's content and function. Its primary purpose is for screen readers. Visually impaired users rely on this text being read aloud to understand what the image conveys.
So it describes the picture for people who can't see it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it also serves other purposes. The alt text is displayed on the page if the image fails to load for some reason. Maybe the file path is wrong, the server is down, or the user has a very slow connection or has images turned off in their browser.
So it's a fallback, too.
It is. And search engines also use alt text to understand the content of images, which can help with your site's SEO. So writing good, descriptive alt text is vital. Don't just stuff it with keywords, actually describe the image meaningfully. An image without alt text is effectively invisible to screen readers and search engine crawlers.
Got it. SRC for the file, alt for description and accessibility. What about controlling the size? Can we set the width and height?
Yes, you can specify width and height attributes directly in the MG tag, like MNG SRC, logo.png, alt company logo, with 200 height 50. Setting these has a benefit. It helps the browser reserve the correct amount of space for the image on the page before the image file has actually finished downloading.
And that helps prevent that annoying page jump when images suddenly load in.
Exactly. It prevents layout shifts, which improves the user experience, and is also something search engines look at for page quality scores, cumulative layout shift, or CLS. However, there's a massive caveat here.
Oh, what's the catch?
The width and height attributes in HTML only tell the browser how much space to allocate. They do not actually resize the image file itself.
So if I have a huge photo file and set with 100?
The user still has to download that entire huge photo file, even though it's only displayed small. This is a huge performance killer. It wastes bandwidth, dramatically slows down page load times, especially on mobile networks.
Ouch. So what's the right way to handle image sizing?
The golden rule is, always resize your images to the approximate dimensions they will be displayed at before you upload them to your server. Use an image editor, like Photoshop, GIMP, or even online tools, to create appropriately sized versions of your images first. Optimize the file itself. Then you can still use the width and height attributes in your HTML to help the browser reserve space, but make sure they match the actual dimensions of the optimized image file.
Optimize first, then specify dimensions in HTML.
Got it.
Yeah.
What about image file formats? JPG, PNG, JEF? There seem to be quite a few choices. Any quick guidelines?
Yeah, the main ones you'll encounter are JPEG, or JPG, is generally best for photographs and complex images with lots of colors. It uses lossy compression, which means it throws away some data to get smaller file sizes, but it's usually great for photos.
Okay, JPEG for photos.
PNG is better for graphics like logos, icons, diagrams, especially if they need transparency, like a logo with no background. It uses lossless compression, meaning no data is lost, so the quality is perfect, but file sizes can be larger than JPEGs for complex images.
PNG for graphics and transparency. GIF is mostly used for simple animations these days. It has a limited color palette, so it's not great for photos or complex graphics.
GIF for simple animations.
And then there's WebP. This is a more modern format developed by Google. It generally offers much better compression than both JPEG and PNG for both lossy and lossless images, and it supports transparency and animation. If you can use WebP, it's often the best choice for web performance, though you might need fallbacks for very old browsers.
WebP sounds like the future. Good to know.
Yeah.
And you touched on performance. Any other quick tips for making images load faster? I've heard terms like lazy loading.
Yes. Lazy loading is a fantastic technique. The idea is simple. Don't load images that the user can't see yet.
Like images way down the page.
Exactly. Images that are below the fold outside the initial visible area. With lazy loading, the browser waits to download those images until the user scrolls down and they are about to enter the viewport.
That sounds like it would speed up the initial page load a lot.
It does, significantly, especially on pages with many images. And the good news is, it's now incredibly easy to implement. You just add the attribute loading lazy to your MNG tag. MNG SRC, image.jpg alt, loading lazy. Most modern browsers support this natively. It's a huge win for performance with minimal effort.
Wow, just adding one attribute, that's powerful.
It really is. Between resizing images properly, choosing the right format, and using lazy loading, you can make a massive difference in how quickly your pages load.
Okay, that image optimization advice is super practical. Now let's talk about the very thing that makes the web links, hyperlinks. The ability to jump from one page or resource to another is absolutely fundamental. How do we create those powerful connections in HTML?
You're right. Hyperlinks are the connective tissue of the internet. They're created using the A element, which stands for anchor, and the most essential attribute for the A element is href.
Href. What does that stand for and what does it do?
Href stands for hypertext reference. Its value specifies the destination of the link, the URL or path that the browser should navigate to when the user clicks the link.
So it's the target address for the link.
Exactly. And the content inside the A tags, between A and A, is what becomes clickable, usually text, but it can also be an image.
And what kinds of destinations can we put in that href attribute? Is it just links to other websites?
I'm much more versatile than that. You can use
Okay.
absolute URLs for linking to external websites. These are the full web addresses starting with HTTP or HTTPS, like a HPS, https.www.google.com. Go to Googly.
Okay, linking out to other sites.
Then you have relative URLs for linking to other pages within your own website. These paths are relative to the current page's location. For example, href about.html about USA might link to an about.html file in the same folder, or a href product1.html product1a might link relative to the site's root.
Why use relative URLs for internal links?
It makes your site much more portable. If you move your website to a different domain name or change the folder structure slightly, your internal links based on relative paths will likely still work without needing to be updated everywhere. It's much more flexible than hard-coding absolute URLs for your own pages.
That makes sense. What if I want to link to a specific section on the same page, like a back-to-top link or jumping from a table of contents?
That's where anchor links or fragment identifiers come in. You first give the target element, like a heading, an 8 attribute, for example, h2id, section 2, details 2. Then your link's href uses a hash symbol, hashtag followed by that ID, AHX section 2, jump to detailsa. Clicking that link will scroll the browser directly to the element with the ID section 2 in the current page.
Super useful for long pages.
Incredibly useful. And there are also special purpose links. You can use href to trigger actions other than just navigating to a web page.
Like what kind of actions?
For example, mailto. A href, mailto.info@example.com. Email USO will typically open the user's default email client with info@example.com in the to field.
Oh, handy for contact links.
Very. Similarly, tell as a chair step tell. Plus 1555-1234-567. Call USA will prompt a phone call on smartphones or devices with calling capabilities.
Great for mobile users.
Definitely. You can also use the download attribute on an anchor tag if you have a hrefreport.pdf download, myannualreport.pdf, download reporta. Clicking the link will instruct the browser to download the report.pdf file instead of trying to display it, and it suggests myannualreport.pdf is the file name.
Wow, the tag and href are really powerful.
Yeah.
Are there any other important attributes or best practices we need to know, especially thinking about user experience or maybe security?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
A very common attribute is target blank. This tells the browser to open the linked document in a new browser tab or window. It's often used for external links so the user doesn't navigate away from your site entirely.
Right, keeps your site open in the original tab.
Exactly. However, whenever you use target blank, it's now considered a crucial security and privacy best practice to also include rel nupener or rel norfer in the same attack.
Rel nupener norfer. What do those do? They sound technical.
They are a bit technical, but they address a potential security vulnerability. When you open a link in a new tab using target blank, the new page gets limited access to the original page object via JavaScript. Window.opener. Rel nupener prevents this access, stopping the link page from potentially manipulating your original page, like sneakily redirecting it.
Whoa, okay, that sounds important. And norfer.
Rel norfer does what nupener does. Plus, it prevents the browser from sending the URL of your page, the referring page, to the link site when the user navigates there. This enhances user privacy, as the destination site won't know where the user clicked from.
So standard practice for external links opening in a new tab should be target blank rel nupener norfer.
Absolutely. It's a simple addition that closes security loopholes and protects user privacy. A subtle but really important detail for anyone building websites today.
That's a fantastic tip. What about the actual text inside the link, the words the user clicks on? Does that matter? It matters hugely. For both accessibility and SEO, you should always use descriptive link text. Avoid generic phrases like click here, read more, or link.
Why are those bad?
Imagine a screen reader user navigating a page by listening to a list of all the links. If they just hear, click here, read more, click here, it tells them absolutely nothing about where those links go. It's incredibly frustrating.
Ah, right. No context.
Exactly. Instead, use text that clearly describes the destination. So instead of click here to learn about HTML, use learn more about HTML on MDN Web Docs. The link text itself is informative.
And this helps search engines too.
Yes, descriptive link text helps search engines understand the topic of the page you're linking to, which can contribute to the relevant signals for both your page and the link page. It's all about providing clear context for everyone, humans using various devices and assistive technologies, and the machines trying to make sense of the web.
Okay, we've really dug into the core of HTML structure and how to add all sorts of content, text, images, lists, links. This is fantastic in theory, but the obvious next question for anyone eager to actually do this is, where do you write this code? You don't just type it into a web browser, do you? What are the essential tools you need to actually get your hands dirty?
That's the crucial next step, moving from theory to practice. Your primary tool for writing HTML code, and really any code, is a text editor.
A text editor like Notepad on Windows or TextEdit on Mac.
Well, you could technically use those basic editors that come with your operating system, but honestly, they're extremely limited for coding. They lack features that make development faster, easier, and less error-prone.
So we need something more specialized.
Definitely. You'll want a dedicated code editor, or sometimes called an IDE, integrated development environment, though for HTML, CSS, JS, a powerful code editor is usually sufficient. These are applications specifically designed for writing and managing code. They are like your digital workbench.
What makes a dedicated code editor so much better than just plain old Notepad? What are the key features that really make a difference when you're writing HTML?
Oh, there are tons of advantages. One of the most immediate and obvious is syntax highlighting.
Syntax highlighting, coloring the code.
Exactly. It automatically color codes different parts of your HTML tags. Might be blue, attributes green, values orange, text black. This makes the code much easier to read, scan, and instantly spot typos or mistakes. It turns a wall of uniform text into a structured, understandable map.
I can see how that would help immediately. What else?
Code completion, often called IntelliSense in some editors. As you start typing, say H, the editor suggests H1, H2, H3, etc. Or if you type SR, it suggests SRC. It can even automatically insert closing tags like adding P when you type P.
Wow, that sounds like it saves a ton of typing and prevents errors.
It's a massive time saver and reduces typos significantly. Then there's error checking, or linting. Many code editors can analyze your code as you type and flag potential errors or violations of best practices in real time, underlining mistakes or showing warnings.
So it catches mistakes before you even try to view the page.
Often, yes. Very helpful. Code formatting is another big one. Tools like Prettier can automatically format your code with consistent indentation and spacing every time you save the file. This keeps your code clean and readable, which is crucial, especially when working in teams.
No more arguing about tabs versus spaces.
Exactly. Plus, these editors are usually highly customizable. You can change themes, colors, keyboard shortcuts, and install countless extensions to add new features, support different languages, or integrate with other tools like Git for version control.
Okay, you've sold me on dedicated code editors. What are some of the most popular and recommended choices out there right now, especially for someone starting with web development?
By far, the most popular and widely recommended code editor for web development today is Visual Studio Code, or VS Code.
VS Code, I've heard of that one.
Yeah, it's free, it's open source, developed by Microsoft, surprisingly.
Right.
It runs on Windows, Mac, and Linux. It's incredibly powerful, highly customizable, and has a massive library of extensions for pretty much anything you can imagine. It has fantastic built-in support for HTML, CSS, and JavaScript.
So VS Code is the top recommendation. Any others worth mentioning?
VS Code is definitely the go-to for most people now. Other solid choices exist, like Sublime Text, which is known for being very fast and lightweight, though it has a license fee for continued use. For Windows users, Notepad++ is a classic free, lightweight option that's much better than standard Notepad. You might also hear about Atom, which was very popular, but it's been officially discontinued or sunsetted by GitHub, so it's not recommended for new projects.
So for a beginner in 2024, VS Code sounds like the safest and best bet.
I'd say so, yeah. The community support, the features, the extensions, it's hard to beat.
Okay, let's say someone downloads VS Code. Are there any absolutely essential extensions they should install right away to make learning HTML easier based on the source material?
Yes, the source highlights a few key ones that will definitely improve the experience. Something like HTML, CSS support enhances the built-in capabilities with better auto-completion and documentation hints. Then, definitely install a code formatter, like Prettier Code Formatter. Set it up to format your code automatically on save. This instantly makes your code look professional and consistent.
Okay, formatting on save sounds great. Anything else?
The absolute game changer for beginners mentioned in the source is the Live Server extension.
Live server. What does that do?
This extension lets you right-click your HTML file in VS Code and open it in your web browser using a local development server. The magic part is that whenever you save changes to your HTML file or linked CSS/JS files, Live Server automatically refreshes the browser tab for you.
Whoa. So no more switching to the browser and hitting F5 every single time I make a change.
Exactly. You just code, hit save, and glance over at your browser to see the changes instantly. It creates a super fast feedback loop that makes learning and experimenting incredibly efficient. It's a massive time saver and highly recommended for anyone starting out.
All right, so we've got our powerful code editor, VS Code, maybe with Live Server running, we write the code there. But we see the results, the actual web page, in a web browser. Are all browsers basically the same when it comes to developing websites, or are some better suited for the job?
That's a good point. While the goal is for your website to look and work correctly in all modern browsers eventually, some browsers offer better tools for the development process itself.
Better tools for developers?
Yes, all modern browsers, Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Apple Safari on macOS, Microsoft Edge are pretty good at rendering HTML and CSS according to web standards. But they all come bundled with built-in developer tools, often just called dev tools.
Dev tools. I think I've accidentally opened those before.
Probably. Usually by hitting F12 or right-clicking and choosing Inspect or Inspect Element, these dev tools are absolutely indispensable for web development. They are your primary tool for debugging and understanding what's happening under the hood.
So it doesn't matter too much which browser I use, as long as it has good dev tools.
Pretty much. Chrome, Firefox, Edge, and Safari all have excellent comprehensive dev tools these days. The specific features might differ slightly, and developers often have personal preferences, but they all offer the core capabilities you need.
And what are those core capabilities? What can I actually do with these dev tools that's so helpful?
A ton. You can inspect the HTML structure, see the live document object model, DOM, how the browser has actually parsed and structured your HTML, including any changes made by JavaScript. You can hover over elements in the HTML tree and see them highlighted on the page.
Like X-ray vision for the page structure.
Exactly. You can also inspect and modify CSS styles. Select any element on the page and see exactly which CSS rules are being applied to it, where they come from, and which ones are being overridden. Even better, you can edit the CSS directly in the DevTools and see the changes reflected live on the page without modifying your actual files.
Wow, so I can experiment with styles in real time.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's perfect for tweaking layouts, colors, fonts, etc. until you get them right. Then you can copy those changes back into your code editor. You could also simulate different screen sizes to test responsiveness, check for accessibility issues, analyze network requests to see how fast your page is loading, and debug JavaScript code step by step.
Okay, these dev tools sound incredibly powerful, so learning how to use them is just as important as learning HTML itself.
I would absolutely say so. Your code editor is where you write, but your browser's dev tools are where you inspect, debug, and truly understand how your code is being interpreted and rendered. They are essential companions in the web development process.
Right, so we have our code editor, like VS Code with extensions, and our browser with its powerful dev tools. Now, how do we keep all our files organized? If I start creating multiple HTML files, maybe some CSS files later, maybe some images, it feels like things could get messy really quickly.
You're anticipating a very common and important challenge. File organization is absolutely crucial, even for a seemingly simple project. Starting with good habits here will save you headaches down the road, especially as your projects grow in complexity.
So what's the recommended approach? Just dump everything into one folder?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
The standard best practice is to create a dedicated top-level folder for each individual web project or website you're working on. Name it something clear and descriptive, like my awesome portfolio or recipe sharing site.
Okay, one main folder per project. What goes inside that folder?
Inside that main project folder, you should then create separate subfolders for different types of assets, different kinds of files.
Subfolders, like what?
A very common and highly recommended structure is to have an index.html file directly inside the main project folder. This is usually the default file browsers look for, your homepage. A CSS subfolder to hold all your CSS style sheet files, .css, and images or img subfolder for all your image files, JPG, PNG, GIF, WebP, SVG, etc. A JS subfolder for any JavaScript files, JGS you might add later for interactivity.
Ah, okay. So index.html at the root, and then separate folders for styles, images, and scripts. Why is this specific structure so important?
It brings clarity and maintainability. It helps you easily find files. You know exactly where to look for a specific style sheet or image. Keep links clean. Using relative paths from your index.html to these folders, like srcimageslogo.png or hrefcstyle.css, becomes straightforward and consistent. Manage complexity. As projects grow, having this separation prevents your main folder from becoming a cluttered mess of hundreds of files. Facilitate collaboration. If you're working with others, this standard structure makes it easier for everyone to understand where things are.
It's like having designated, clearly labeled drawers in your digital workbench instead of throwing all your tools into one big box.
That's the perfect analogy. Everything has its place. The source material reinforces this by suggesting you immediately create your index.html file within your main project folder, then perhaps create those season images subfolders right away, even if they're empty initially.
Get the structure right from the start.
Exactly. Then, when you open that index.html file with Live Server, you're all set up in an organized environment, ready to see your changes instantly. This structured approach, even for just one simple HTML page, builds the right foundation for tackling much larger and more complex web projects later on.
Okay, we've got a really solid grasp now on structuring pages and displaying static information, text, images, lists, links. That's huge. But the web isn't just about broadcasting information out, it's interactive, right? How do we flip the script and let users actually give us information? Think signing up for a newsletter, submitting an order, searching for something, leaving a comment. How do we build that two-way street?
That's where HTML forms come into play, and they are absolutely fundamental to web interactivity. Forms are the primary mechanism through which users can send data back to a web server.
So they're like the input mechanism for the web.
Exactly. Think of them as digital versions of real-world forms. Questionnaires, order pads, login prompts, search boxes, comment fields. They provide the structure for collecting user input and sending it off for processing.
So if I want to create a section on my page where users can input data, where do I start? Is there a specific container element for all the different input fields and buttons?
Yes, absolutely. The starting point and the essential container for any web form is the form element. Everything related to a single form submission, all the input fields, labels, drop-downs, checkboxes, and the submit button must be enclosed within a pair of form tags.
Okay, so form wraps the whole interactive section. Does the form tag itself need any special instructions?
It does. The form element requires two crucial attributes to tell the browser how to handle the data submission: action and method.
Action and method. What do those do?
The action attribute specifies the URL where the collected form data should be sent when the user submits the form. This URL typically points to a script or an application on the web server, written in a language like PHP, Python, Node.js, etc., that is specifically designed to receive and process that incoming data.
So action is the destination address for the data.
Precisely. It tells the form, where should I send this information? The method attribute, on the other hand, defines the HTTP method that the browser should use to send that data to the server.
HTTP method. I think I've heard of get, t, and post. Are those the main ones?
Those are the two most common and important methods used with HTML forms: get, t, and post. Choosing the right one is really important.
Okay, can you break down the difference? When would I use get, t versus post?
Sure. With the get method, the browser takes all the data from your form fields, the name-value pairs, and appends it directly to the URL specified in the action attribute, usually after a question mark.
So the data becomes visible in the browser's address bar.
Exactly. You'll see something like www.example.com, search.query HTML plus forms and category tutorials. Because the data is in the URL, GET requests are easily bookmarkable and shareable. They're generally used for things like search queries or filtering results, where the data isn't sensitive and you might want to repeat the request easily.
Okay, GET for non-sensitive data, visible in the URL. What about PSD?
With the PST method, the form data is sent in the body of the HTTP request, separate from the URL. It's not visible in the address bar.
Ah, so it's hidden from view.
Correct. This makes PST the appropriate choice for submitting sensitive information like passwords, credit card numbers, or personal details. It's also better for sending large amounts of data, as URLs have practical length limits, whereas the requester body can typically handle much more data.
So, rule of thumb, if it's sensitive or large, use POST. If it's simple, non-sensitive, maybe like a search, use GET.
That's a great rule of thumb. Choosing the right method is fundamental for security and how the data is handled on the server. Always use POST for anything sensitive. It's a basic but critical security consideration when building forms.
Got it. Action for where it goes, method, usually POST for sensitive stuff, for how it gets there. Now, before we even talk about the fields where users type things in, the source material really emphasizes using the label element. It seems like just text next to a box, but why is it considered so important?
The label element is way more than just text. It's crucial for both accessibility and basic usability of your forms. Its purpose is to explicitly associate a text label with a specific form input field.
Explicitly associate, how does it do that?
It does this using the for attribute on the label tag. The value of the for attribute must exactly match the id attribute of the corresponding input field. So you'd have label for username.label and then input type text, id username. That for username links directly to add username.
Okay, that for and id connection is the key. What benefits does that connection provide for the user?
Two main benefits. First, usability. When you properly link a label to an input using for and id, clicking on the label itself will automatically set the focus into the associated input field.
Oh, so I don't have to click precisely on the tiny input box. I can click the larger label text.
Exactly. This is especially helpful on mobile devices with small touch targets and also beneficial for users with motor impairments. Just makes the form easier to interact with.
Nice little usability boost. What's the second, maybe bigger, benefit?
Accessibility. This explicit association is vital for screen reader users. When a screen reader encounters an input field, it uses the linked label text to announce what the field is for.
Ah, so instead of just saying text input, it says name.text input.
Precisely. Without that linked label, the user might have no idea what information is expected in that field. A properly labeled form is understandable and usable by everyone, regardless of how they access the web. It's a fundamental aspect of building accessible forms and should never be skipped.
Okay, labels are essential for usability and accessibility. Got it. Now for the main event. Getting the user's actual input. The input element seems to be the real workhorse here. The source says it's incredibly versatile, and its behavior changes a lot based on its type attribute. What are some of the most common and important type values we'll encounter?
You're absolutely right. Input is like a Swiss Army knife for forms. Its type attribute dramatically changes what kind of input control is displayed and how it behaves. The most basic and common is type text.
Just a plain text box.
Yep, a simple single-line text field for general input, like names, addresses, subjects, etc. Then, very importantly, there's type password.
For passwords, obviously. How is it different from type text?
It looks like a text box, but any characters the user types are visually obscure. They appear as dots or asterisks instead of the actual letters. This prevents someone looking over the user's shoulder from seeing the password.
Okay, so it hides the input. But you mentioned earlier this doesn't actually make the password secure when it's sent, right?
Correct. That's a crucial distinction. Type password only provides visual masking in the browser. Real security encrypting the connection with HTTPS, securely hashing and salting the password on the server before storing it is handled separately. This type is just for local privacy during input.
Good clarification. What other common types are there?
Type email is specifically designed for email addresses. Modern browsers will often provide basic client-side validation for this type, checking if the input looks like a plausible email address containing an @ and a domain.
So it can catch simple typos before submission?
It can help, yes. Type number restricts input to numerical values. Browsers might also provide little up-down spinner arrows for adjusting the number.
Okay. What about choices, like selecting from options?
For that, you have type checkbox, which displays a small square box. Checkboxes allow users to select 0, 1, or multiple options from a group. Each checkbox is typically independent.
So I can check multiple boxes if I want.
Usually, yes. Contrast that with type radio. Radio buttons appear as small circles and are used for groups of options where the user must select only one choice.
Like selecting yes or no.
Exactly. Or choosing a shipping method. For radio buttons to work as a mutually exclusive group, all the radio buttons in that group must share the same name attribute. That's how the browser knows they belong together, and only one can be selected at a time.
Ah, the shared name attribute links them.
Yeah.
Good tip. And how do we actually submit the form?
That's typically done with type submit. This creates a button that, when clicked, triggers the form submission process, sending the data to the URL specified in the form tag's action attribute using the specified method.
Okay, so those cover a lot of common input needs. Beyond the type, what other attributes are really important for input elements? You mentioned ID for labels and name for radio buttons.
Right. The name attribute is essential for almost all input types. You get maybe submit buttons sometimes. This name is used as the key when the form data is sent to the server. The server receives the data as name-value pairs like username John Doe. Without a name, the data from that input usually won't be submitted at all.
So name is crucial for the server to identify the data. What about value?
The value attribute has different roles depending on the input type. For text fields, email, password, etc., it can set an initial default value that appears in the field when the page loads. For checkboxes and radio buttons, the value attribute defines the data that gets sent to the server if that option is selected. For example, input type radio name, color value blue, I'd see blue label for see blue label. If the user selects this, the server receives color blue. For submit buttons, value sets the text displayed on the button itself. For JValue login.
Okay, name identifies the data key, value sets the data content. What about hints inside the field?
That's the placeholder attribute. It lets you provide a short hint or example text that appears inside the input field when it's empty, like e.g. John Doe or enter your email. This placeholder text disappears as soon as the user starts typing. It's purely a visual hint, not a replacement for a proper label.
Good distinction. And you mentioned validation attributes earlier.
Yes, HTML5 introduced several useful attributes for basic client-side validation. Required is a simple Boolean attribute. Just adding it to an input type text name and name required, prevents the form from being submitted if that field is left empty. Browsers usually show a default error message.
Handy for making sure fields aren't skipped.
Very handy. Others include min length and max length to specify the minimum and maximum number of characters for text inputs. Min and max define the minimum and maximum allowed values for number inputs. Pattern lets you specify regular expression that the input value must match for more complex validation rules, like specific formats for phone numbers or zip codes.
So HTML5 gives us quite a bit of built-in validation power.
It does. You can also use attributes like read-only to display a value that the user can't change, or disabled to make an input completely non-interactive and prevent its value from being submitted. Disabled inputs usually appear grayed out.
Okay, lots of control there. Now, going back to validation, you stressed that this HTML5 client-side validation, required pattern, etc., is great for user experience, but we absolutely cannot rely on it alone for security or data integrity. Can you just hammer that point home one more time? Why is server-side validation still non-negotiable?
Absolutely. It's probably one of the most critical concepts for anyone building web applications. Client-side validation happens in the user's browser. It's convenient. It provides instant feedback. It catches simple mistakes. But because it runs on the user's machine, it can be easily bypassed.
How can it be bypassed?
A user could simply disable JavaScript in their browser. Or they could use the browser's developer tools to manually remove the required attribute from the HTML before submitting. Or a malicious user could skip the browser entirely and send a handcrafted HTTP request directly to your server, completely ignoring your HTML form and its validation rules.
Yikes. So you just can't trust anything that comes from the client side without checking it again.
Exactly. You absolutely must assume that any data arriving at your server could be invalid, incomplete, or even malicious, regardless of what client-side checks you have in place. Therefore, robust validation must always be performed again on the server side before you process the data, interact with your database, or perform any critical actions. Client-side validation is for user convenience. Server-side validation is for security and data integrity. You need both.
That's crystal clear. Convenience on the client, security on the server. Now, besides the super versatile input tag, are there any other common form elements for different kinds of input that the source mentions?
Yes, there are a couple other important ones. For multi-line text input, like for a comment box, a message field, or detailed description, you don't use input type text. Instead, you use the text area element. It gives you a resizable box where users can type paragraphs of text.
Text area for longer text. Got it. What about drop-down lists?
For drop-down lists, where the user selects one or sometimes multiple options from a predefined list, you use the select element. Inside the select element, you define each individual choice using option elements, like select name, country, option value, United States option value, CAD-AFIDA option select.
Okay, select with option tags inside for drop-downs. Anything else?
The source might also briefly mention data list. It's kind of a hybrid. You link it to a standard input type text field, and it provides a list of predefined suggestions that appear as the user types, like autocomplete. But unlike select, the user isn't restricted to only those options. They can still type their own value if needed.
Interesting. So input, text area, select.
Yep.
These give us a pretty good toolkit for building most kinds of forms.
They really do. They cover the vast majority of user input scenarios you'll encounter on the web. Hashtag 5. Troubleshooting and next steps for your journey.
Wow, we have covered an enormous amount of ground today. Seriously, from the absolute bare bones structure of an HTML page, through adding all sorts of content, images, links, lists, and now even getting user input with forms, it feels like we've built a really solid foundation.
We definitely have. These are the core building
But
blocks.
let's be real, for anyone just starting out, the moment you try to write your own code, you're gonna hit snags. Errors happen. Things won't look right. It can be incredibly frustrating. What are some of the most common classic mistakes that beginners make when writing their first HTML, and what are the quickest ways to spot and fix them?
That's such an important point. Yes, you will make mistakes. Everyone does, especially when learning. It's totally normal, just part of the process. Don't get discouraged. Some really common beginner mistakes include, first, as we hammered home earlier, forgetting the dodoxy type E HTML declaration right at the top. If it's missing, you risk the browser going into Quarks mode, leading to unpredictable rendering. Always check that first line.
Okay, check the doc type. What's next?
Missing closing tags. This is huge. Most HTML elements need both an opening tag and a closing tag, P. Forgetting a closing tag or maybe mistyping it, like P instead of P for a paragraph, can mess up the structure and cause elements to render incorrectly or run into each other. Remember, only specific tags like MMG, BR, HR, input, meta are self-closing.
Right, make sure tags are properly opened and closed.
Then there's saving the file with the wrong extension. You write all this beautiful HTML, but you save it as mypage.txt instead of mypage.html. The browser won't know it's a web page. Double check that .html or sometimes .htm extension.
Simple mistake, but obviously critical.
Very. Also, typos in tag names or attribute names. HTML is generally case-insensitive for tags and attributes, so P often works like P, but spelling matters. If you type imagey instead of image or sorc instead of src, that image simply won't show up, and the browser won't necessarily tell you why in an obvious way. Proofread your tags and attributes carefully.
Those little typos can be the hardest to spot sometimes. Anything else structure-wise?
Yes, incorrect nesting of elements. This trips up a lot of beginners. Remember the Russian nesting doll analogy. Elements must be closed in the reverse order they were opened. You can't have pem some text pem. The M tag was opened inside the P, so it must be closed before the P is closed. Correct nesting is pem some text m.
Bad nesting can lead to validation errors and really strange rendering issues.
Okay, check nesting. Last opened, first closed. Good rule. So if someone checks all these common things, dot type, closing tags, extension, typos, nesting, and their page still isn't working right, what's their absolute first line of defense? What's the go-to tool? Your browser's built-in developer tools. We mentioned them before, hit F12 or right-click and inspect. They are your best friend for debugging.
How specifically do they help find HTML problems?
The Elements, or Inspector tab, shows you the live DOM tree, how the browser actually interpreted your HTML structure, including any corrections it might have tried to make for errors. You can examine the structure, see if tags are missing or misplaced. Often, the dev tools will even highlight HTML parsing errors directly in the console tab, sometimes giving you line numbers or specific warnings about malformed markup. It's like having a diagnostic tool that shows you what the browser is really seeing and where it got confused. Learning to read the Elements panel and check the console is a fundamental debugging skill.
Okay, dev tools are the key to diagnosing problems. So, wrapping this all up, after this deep dive, what does this all mean for someone who wants to start building for the web? What's the single biggest takeaway message, and what concrete steps should they take right now?
I think the biggest takeaway is that you now understand the absolute bedrock of the web. You know that HTML provides the essential semantic structure. You've seen the core elements for text, lists, images, links, even basic forms. And you know about the essential tools, a good code editor, and browser dev tools. The key insight is that HTML isn't some mystical black magic. It's a logical, readable language for describing content and structure. It's the blueprint.
And what should they do with that knowledge? What's the immediate next step?
Practice. Seriously, the source material emphasizes practice activities. That's absolutely crucial. Don't just listen to a talk about it or read the guide. Build something.
Like what kind of small project?
It starts super simple. Create a basic web page using what we discussed. Put in the downLC type HTML, head and body. Add a title and the essential meta tags, charset, viewport, in the head. In the body, add a main H1 heading. Write a couple of P paragraphs. Try adding an image with proper src and descriptive alt text. Maybe find a free image online or use one you have. Create a simple new list with a few line items. Add a link to an external website, maybe using Target Blank and Rel, Nupin, or Norfer. Just build that simple page, type the code yourself in VS Code, use Live Server to see it update, make mistakes, use the dev tools to figure out why it broke, fix it. That hands-on cycle of coding, testing, and debugging is where the real learning happens. It's the only way to truly make this knowledge stick and build confidence. Start small, experiment, and don't be afraid to break things. That's how you learn best. Hashtag outro.
And that officially wraps up our deep dive into the absolute fundamentals of HTML. Phew, that was a lot, but hopefully you now feel really equipped. Not just to understand what HTML is on a theoretical level, but to actually confidently take those first crucial steps in building your very own small corner of the internet.
Yeah, we've laid out that essential skeleton, we've shown how to fill it with basic content using semantic elements, and we've even helped you set up your own digital workbench with the right tools.
So thinking about everything we covered, what HTML element are you most excited to try out first? Is it structuring text with headings, building lists, embedding images, creating links, maybe even dipping your toes into a simple form?
Whatever it is, we really encourage you. Download VS Code if you haven't already, create that first index.html file, maybe set up that basic project structure with citus and images folders, and just start experimenting right away. Build that simple page we outlined.
And as you start on this journey, here's something to think about. The entire, unbelievably intricate, dynamic, interactive web that we navigate every single day, it's all built upon these surprisingly simple, readable HTML elements that we've just discussed.
It's kind of amazing, isn't it? How does such a relatively basic building block, just tags, describing content, lead to the incredibly complex, beautiful, and functional experiences we have online? From global social networks to immersive games to complex productivity apps.
That journey from a simple H1 hello world.h1 to, well, anything you can imagine online, it truly starts right here. With this fundamental understanding of HTML structure and semantics, it really shows how powerful, simple, well-defined building blocks can be when you start combining them.